HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Collector of Lives, Giorgio Vasari and the Invention of Art, by Ingrid Rowland and Noah Charney, read by Jennifer M. Dixon. Introduction 1. The Lost Leonardo. As you step out of the blinding Florentine sunlight and into the terracotta-scented Palazzo Vecchio, it will take a moment for your eyes to adjust. But when they do, and the Sala dei Cinquecento leaps into clarity, you may be surprised to find yourself surrounded by giants. The soaring walls of this vast meeting hall, 12,750 square feet, the size of 3 basketball courts, are painted with larger-than-life-size frescoes of riding and ranting warriors. 4 enormous battle scenes show the military triumphs of the Medici family, painted in 1563 by Giorgio Vasari. His soldiers bulge out of skin-tight armour as they assault a fortified city by lamplight. The Mannerist style of painting, with its steroid-popping musculature and neon armour-clad warriors, is not everyone's cup of tea. Even fellow Mannerists mocked each other. The great sculptor, Benvenuto Cellini, got it just about right when he said that Baccio Bandinelli's Hercules looked like a sackful of melons. Based on a technique developed by the followers of Michelangelo in 16th century Florence, with its international contortions and refusal to adhere to the laws of physics and anatomy, Mannerist paintings look, to many, like piles of bodybuilders in day-glow spandex engaged in an overzealous round of twister. Yet the colossal frescoes that cover the walls of the Sala dei Cinquecento are undoubtedly awe-inspiring, considered masterworks of 16th century painting. They are also intriguing for another reason. Buried beneath one of the 4 frescoed walls may lie a treasure that in the imagination of the general public is of far greater importance, one that, should it still exist, has not been seen for 5 centuries. Hiding behind Vasari's fresco could be a lost painting by Leonardo da Vinci, one that tells the tale of a battle between 2 of the greatest painters of Renaissance Italy, and hinges on a mystery sparked by another masterwork by Giorgio Vasari, a book titled Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects. Of the lost Leonardo, the known facts are these. In the 16th century, the Sala dei Cinquecento, with its theatrically tall ceilings, functioned as the reception room used by the Medicis when hosting visiting dignitaries whom they wished to awe. In 1505, during a brief period when the Medici family was expelled from Florence, Leonardo began a monumental wall painting, 54 by 21 feet in size, in the Sala, the Battle of Anghiari, a talked melee of riders and swordsmen. The Florentines also commissioned Michelangelo to paint a second battle scene on the room's opposite wall, the Battle of Cascina. Michelangelo made a preparatory sketch but never executed the fresco, for he felt that Leonardo's side of the room had better light and that he would be at a disadvantage in this intentional duel between the city's 2 leading living artists. Leonardo began his side, but never finished. His partial Battle of Anghiari is known only by a number of copies and an engraving. The most famous copy of the work was painted by Rubens around 1604, but the Flemish painter had to use the engraving as his model because the original had been covered over 4 decades earlier by none other than Vasari. There is no indication in Leonardo's life that he ever made a complete cartoon for the Battle of Anghiari, only the design for one section, the Battle for the Standard. That was copied several times by contemporary artists. Clearly, their copies were made from the cartoon, not the fresco. It seems that Leonardo painted only a small portion of one wall, but the beauty and dynamism of his embattled warriors made the unfinished work a point of pilgrimage for artists who travelled to Florence. That Leonardo gave up on what seemed like a promising project was indicative of his particular brand of genius. The notoriously impatient artist rarely completed anything. He wrote that one of his regrets was the fact that he never once finished a single painting. He was exaggerating, but not by much. According to Leonardo's own notes, a portentous disaster struck when he was just at the start of painting his Florentine battle scene. His diary, dated the 6th of June, 1505, reads, "Just as I lowered the brush, the weather changed for the worse, and the bells started to toll. The cartoon was torn, water poured down, and it rained very heavily until nightfall, and the day was as night." Our best guess is that melodramatic weather, as well as Leonardo's habit of rarely finishing anything, led to his deserting the commission. There are only 22 extant paintings by Leonardo, and 8 more that are mentioned in archival documents and primary sources, but have never been found. Should this unfinished battle scene resurface, it would become the 23rd. What we know of Leonardo's life and stories we have learned largely from Vasari. In 1550, half a century after Leonardo halted production on the Battle of Anghiari, Giorgio Vasari published the first edition of the Lives of Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects, often called Lives of the Artists, or just Lives as a shorthand. A group biography of the leading Renaissance artists, many of whom he knew personally. Whether or not you've studied art history, you may have heard some of Vasari's stories, part historical urban legend, part morality tale. His great collective biography spun visual aphorisms that endure to this day. Brunelleschi won the commission to construct the dome of Florence Cathedral by balancing an egg on a slab of marble, something none of the other competing architects could imagine doing. Andrea del Verrocchio assigned his teenage pupil, a kid named Leonardo da Vinci, to paint a single figure in his Baptism of Christ, but this one figure was deemed so superior to those painted by the master that Verrocchio gave up painting forever and reverted to sculpture. The mysterious painter Giorgione decided to die for love rather than live without his sweetheart, snuggling with her in bed as she succumbed to the plague, knowing that he, too, would contract it and die shortly thereafter. And then there's the dirty joke Vasari made at the expense of his own sister, the one that made Pietro Aretino, Titian's best friend, laugh so hard that he had a stroke and died. Spanning 3 centuries and the length of Italy, with side trips across Europe, Vasari's biographies range widely in their length and depth, but their progression outlines the trajectory of Renaissance art and architecture, from the crude energy of the early 14th century to the refined professionalism of the late 16th. Each artist's life presents a small-scale history of personal development within the larger scheme of general artistic progress, and wherever he can, Vasari provides examples of each artist's work as evidence to confirm his story, arranged in chronological order. None of these elements should be taken for granted. The idea of a new entity called art was one of the great collective inventions of the working people commemorated in these biographies, along with the idea that they themselves, as creators of art, had become something more than craftsmen. They became thinkers as well as makers. The idea of steady, positive progress also identifies Vasari clearly as a man of his own era. Ancient writers complained that the world had declined from a lost golden age, but the lives, end with a golden age of art ushered in by Michelangelo and secured for the future by the training program of the Florentine Accademia del Disegno, Academy of Design or Drawing, founded by Vasari himself. Vasari had good reason for his confidence. By the time he put the finishing touches on his second edition, Italian artists dominated a profession that had expanded its range of influence across continents, and by putting the works of his subjects into chronological order, Vasari stressed their capacity for personal and professional development through experimentation with new techniques and new styles. Each life begins by identifying the artist's region and family. Talent could emerge anywhere and at any level of society, from a humble Tuscan shepherd boy like Giotto to the mellifluously named Milanese noblewoman Sophonisba Anguissola. But talent could thrive only through rigorous training and tireless application. This is Giorgio Vasari, the working man speaking, but also Giorgio Vasari, the Tuscan, inspired by his native region's traditional work ethic and its treasury of wise sayings for every occasion. The most remarkable aspect of these lives is also the aspect that makes them hardest to read. The chronological lists of each artist's work, testimony to Vasari's talent for organization and his pioneering scholarship in a brand new field, but not enthralling literature. And so, in among the lists, the author adds the comments that give the lives their enduring spice, his own opinions about good artistic practice and wise living, and, following the lead of ancient biographers, juicy bits of gossip. Some of the more important lives also serve an additional purpose, or illustrate an additional point. Giotto is the great pioneer of art's rebirth. Leonardo da Vinci had trouble finishing what he started, a common problem for artists and everyone else. His example shows that talent is not enough to build a career. Persistence counts too. Piero di Cosimo plays the role of the eccentric artist, surviving on hard-boiled eggs and painting wild fantasies. The life of Raphael provides an opportunity for Vasari to show his prowess at an ancient literary form. Ekphrasis, describing a picture in words. Michelangelo embodies both a perfect artist and a perfect human being, never mind that in real life he could be irascible and stingy. Though Vasari also records some of his idol's peculiarities, like the dogskin boots that he wore night and day until they became glued to his own skin. These are among the funny, poignant, and memorable stories told in Giorgio Vasari's lives. No wonder that for 5 centuries they have provided the standard primary source text for almost all of the world's art history courses, from basic introductions to postgraduate levels. Vasari has been called the father of art history. He is credited with being the first author to consider artistic movements, the chain of influence from master to pupil, the link between an artist's personal biography, beliefs, and artistic creation. His methodology effectively established the way we study art history today and cemented the primacy of Florentine Renaissance art in the popular imagination. You don't need to have read the lives in order to know many of Vasari's stories and ideas. The way you think of art is largely due to Vasari, whether or not you realize it, and whether or not you've actually read his book. That book also influenced the way we think of history more broadly, the way museums are curated and objects displayed, how biography is written and read, and how we look to the personal history of famous historical figures to understand why they behaved as they did, why they made decisions that shifted our world. Since its publication, Vasari's lives has been fundamental to the way we see and study art. Still read by every student of European art history around the world, and still the primary source for scholars of Renaissance art and thought, Lives has had a profound effect on how we analyze and define art. Its influence has been consistent for nearly 5 centuries. Not only is it a point of departure for all other authors writing on art, the book has also colored how the general public approaches different artists. Our own idolatry of Leonardo, Raphael, and Michelangelo follows directly upon Vasari's effusive praise of them. By exploring who Vasari was, how he wrote his book, and what influence it has had on how we perceive art, then we can also explore the significant questions of what art is, why it is so important to the human species, and how we have interacted with it. While Vasari was the most prominent and successful artist in Italy during the middle to late 16th century, he was also something of a groupie. He idolized his peers, particularly Michelangelo, yet as he assembled the anecdotes that populate his lives, Vasari also carried out an extraordinarily successful career as a practicing artist and architect. He collected drawings avidly and was instrumental in establishing drawings as a significant art form. Before his time, artists viewed their sketches as preparatory material, not fit for display and generally discarded. The elderly Michelangelo, when he realized that he was near death, frantically burned as many of his own drawings as he could in order to erase evidence of how hard he had worked to prepare his paintings and sculptures. He hoped that posterity would believe that his finished creations emerged spontaneously as a product of his genius, not of his diligent preparation. It was only thanks to Vasari's physical intervention, wresting reams of drawings from Michelangelo's hands as he stood before an open fire, that a reasonable number of those drawings survives. A few years back, a Michelangelo drawing sold for £13 million. That price, the way we value drawings, and Michelangelo, and a drawing by Michelangelo, are all a direct legacy of Vasari's interventions and influence. Vasari kept several large-format books, called his Libri dei Disegni, books of drawings, which functioned as collectors' albums, filled with drawings by the artists he admired. These books are unfortunately lost, but they testify to his loving admiration of Tuscan artists above all, especially Michelangelo and Leonardo. Thus, when the Medici hired Giorgio Vasari to redecorate the Sala dei Cinquecento, they presented him with a major dilemma. His own admiration for these artists would have caused him serious reservations about destroying work by either man, even a painting only partly finished. Would such a serious painter and collector willingly destroy Leonardo's Battle of Anghiari? It seems more likely that when he was entrusted with remodeling the Sala and painting it with his own frescoes in 1563, Vasari would have done anything he could to preserve Leonardo's fresco. The Medici family was in exile when Leonardo painted his battle. The Medici returned to Florence and to their Palazzo Vecchio in 1512 to find the unfinished painting on the wall, a painful reminder of their temporary exile. Had the Leonardo been completed, it might have been a different story. The Medici admired his work and might, indeed, have allowed it to remain, but Leonardo had tried an experimental undercoating for the fresco, mixed with wax, that caused the colours to run before they had a chance to dry. A dilapidated monument to their exile was not what the Medici wanted to advertise when they met foreign dignitaries in the Sala dei Cinquecento, and so, some 50 years after the family's return to power, Duke Cosimo de' Medici commissioned Giorgio Vasari to repaint the Sala with battle scenes of great Florentine, that is, Medici, victories. Vasari fulfilled his commission, and the Sala now shines with his frescoed battle scenes. But the question remains, what happened to Leonardo's Battle of Anghiari? The answer lies in Vasari's own biography, the story and content of his lives, and the clue to an art historical treasure hunt that Vasari himself painted onto the wall. The only two words that appear in his sprawling frescoes: cerca, trova, seek and you shall find. Maurizio Serracini leans in to examine a detail of the fresco that covers the enormous hall of 500 in Florence's Palazzo Vecchio. The 67-year-old engineer, in an immaculate lab coat, has been staring at the same spot for the better part of an hour. Cerca, trova. Serracini believes this to be a clue. Vasari's fresco, he says, is covering up the lost Leonardo. This theory hasn't made Serracini popular among art historians, many of whom claim he intends to damage or even destroy Vasari's work to get at the Leonardo, if indeed the Leonardo is even there. Not only do I not understand and resent this animosity, he says, I would like to say that historians have not produced a document stating it is not there. With hidden messages, lost treasures, clues about Leonardo, and a modern melodrama in an ancient palace, this may all seem like an excerpt from the Da Vinci Code. Perhaps it should. Throughout the questionable scholarship and fantasy in that novel, at least one character in it is real. Serracini actually appears in the story, described as an art diagnostician who was determined to make public his discovery of a ruined temple in the background of Leonardo's Adoration of the Magi, a detail that later painters had covered up in order to subvert Da Vinci's true intentions. Whatever the true nature of the underdrawing, it had yet to be made public. But Serracini is a scientist to the end, never satisfied with anything but hard data. He has never read the Da Vinci Code. He has made public his discoveries and the scientific data and images to back them up, and he leaves the analysis and interpretation to art historians. Despite his successes with other works by Leonardo, and with scores of monuments and paintings throughout Italy, Serracini was drawn to his revolutionary field by the very mystery he's currently trying to solve. In 1975, Serracini and his colleagues noticed a tiny bit of text hidden within Vasari's frescoes in the Sala dei Cinquecento. Throughout the entire room, one frescoed wall of which is 177 feet long, Vasari had painted exactly two words: cerca, trova. Seek and you shall find. Years later, Serracini would be summoned by the Italian Ministry of Culture to supervise the search for Leonardo's lost Battle of Anghiari. An elegant gentleman with a cupola of white hair and the passion and drive of a man half his age, Serracini now is an art detective, leading a team of scientists and art historians in the search for the lost Leonardo, which could be the single most important discovery in the art world of the 21st century. Serracini has been called the real Indiana Jones and the tracker of a real-life Da Vinci Code. He has been lauded by art historians and by the World Science Festival as a cultural heritage engineer, a title that did not exist before him. He established a new field, one in which art historical mysteries are solved through advanced forensic scientific investigation. He has studied over 2,500 artworks and monuments by means of new technologies, many of which he himself adapted and developed. Through his use of advanced technology, Saraceni represents a new generation of art historian, inheriting the mantle of Giorgio Vasari but relying on an entirely different arsenal. Whereas Vasari studied artists and art through word of mouth, anecdotes, and found letters and documents, Saraceni uses high-tech gadgetry. And it is through this gadgetry, along with some old-fashioned detective work, that Saraceni looks poised to solve a mystery planted by Vasari centuries ago. Cerca, trova. Saraceni and many leading Leonardo scholars believe this to be a valid clue from Vasari, indicating that he somehow preserved Leonardo's painting while still fulfilling his commission, and that Leonardo's fresco secco, dry fresco, is hidden beneath a false wall on which Vasari painted his own frescoes. In 2006, Saraceni announced that he had discovered a 1.5-inch hollow gap behind Vasari's frescoed wall and the outer wall of the sala. This double wall, which Vasari must have built when he painted his frescoes, is unheard of and has no architectural or structural rationale. Further, the gap is behind only one of Vasari's 4 frescoed walls, the one with the words Cerca trova written on it, the one in which Leonardo is thought to have painted. Saraceni has been stuck in a tangle of red tape, the infamous Italian bureaucracy that causes speeding ideas to grind to a halt. But in 2011, the National Geographic Society announced that it would co-fund the search for the lost fresco, and permission was granted to begin in 2012. What Saraceni found over the following few months led to wild enthusiasm, but also to tremendous anger within the art history community. On the 12th of March 2012, Saraceni and his team announced that they had located a paint sample on the hidden wall by drilling through the Vasari fresco. The black paint sample matched the chemical composition of paints used in other known Leonardo paintings, including the Mona Lisa. It is now clear that something is back there, buried beneath the Vasari. The hunt has led to a real buried treasure, but the question is whether what will be found is worth destroying a portion of another masterpiece, the Vasari fresco. At least, that's how it was presented by the world media at the time. The truth is more complicated and more intriguing, and in order to find the Leonardo, to solve the puzzle, to unbury the treasure, we need to understand Giorgio Vasari. 2. How to read Vasari's lives. Vasari's life and his lives are an ideal lens through which to examine the history of how humans have thought about art, from the Chauvet cave paintings and Plato's parable of the cave to the 20th and 21st centuries, when art has become a urinal turned on its side and a stuffed shark in formaldehyde. We will examine the life and times of Vasari, who lived at the heart of the 16th century art world, as well as the contents and legacy of his most enduring and influential creation, perhaps ironically not a work of art in the traditional sense, but a book. The Lives of the Most Eminent Painters, Sculptors and Architects is a group biography of Renaissance artists, almost exclusively Italian, first published in 1550, researched and written by Vasari in collaboration with his scholarly friend Vincenzo Borghini and a host of local informants. It traces what Vasari terms the rebirth, rinascita, of art, after it had fallen into extreme ruin with the destruction of ancient Rome, through 3 distinct periods of continuous development culminating in the art of Michelangelo. The massive work is divided into 3 parts, each roughly corresponding to a century, and for each part there is a hero who is both an all-around artist and, importantly, a Tuscan. Giotto di Bondone, 1266 or 1267 to 1337. Filippo Brunelleschi, 13.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?